Have you ever wondered why the woman you loved seemed to change overnight? Why the soft, gentle creature you fell for suddenly became distant, calculating, almost cold? Why you feel like you're always walking on eggshells, trying to decode her moods, her silences, her sudden shifts in affection? If you've ever felt like you're playing a game where only she knows the rules, then what I'm about to tell you will shatter every romantic illusion you've ever held about women and love. What he discovered wasn't hatred toward women, it wasn't misogyny or bitterness, it was a cold, surgical analysis of power dynamics that most people are too emotionally invested to see clearly. Because here's what Nietzsche understood that you don't. The woman you think you love doesn't exist. She's a performance, a carefully crafted character designed to obtain something from you. And what she's after isn't your heart, it's your will. This video isn't about hating women, it's about waking up to reality. It's about understanding that everything you've been taught about feminine nature, about love, about relationships, has been a beautiful lie designed to keep you emotionally compliant. Because the moment you see the truth that Nietzsche saw, everything changes. The way you approach women, the way you value yourself, the way you navigate the complex psychological warfare that modern dating has become. So if you're tired of being confused, manipulated, and emotionally drained by relationships that never quite make sense, if you're ready to see behind the mask that even the most genuine woman unconsciously wears, then stay with me. Because what you're about to learn will make you dangerous to every woman who tries to control you through emotion. And that, according to Nietzsche, is exactly what you need to become. Nietzsche wrote, "Man's happiness, I will. Woman's happiness, he wills." At first glance, this seemed like ancient misogyny. But look deeper. What Nietzsche was revealing is that men and women operate from fundamentally different relationship strategies. Men seek to impose their will directly onto the world. Women seek to influence the will of those who impose. This isn't about intelligence or morality. This is about survival strategies that evolved over millennia. When direct power was denied to women, they mastered indirect power. When physical dominance was the male domain, psychological influence became the female specialty. And here's what most men never realize. This influence is so subtle, so sophisticated, that you don't even know it's happening. Think about your last relationship. Remember how she never directly told you what to do? Instead, she created emotional climates. She would withdraw when you acted in ways she disapproved of. She would become warm and affectionate when you behaved as she preferred. She didn't command, she conditioned. And you, thinking you were making free choices, slowly molded yourself into the shape she desired. Nietzsche called this the eternal feminine, not the nurturing goddess that romantic poetry celebrates, but the master manipulator who shapes reality through emotional influence rather than direct confrontation. She doesn't need to argue with you. She just needs to make you feel uncomfortable when you disagree with her. She doesn't need to control you overtly. She just needs to become the source of your emotional validation. This is why you find yourself changing in relationships, why you start giving up hobbies she doesn't approve of, why you begin to see your friends less, why your own opinions start to sound uncertain even to yourself. You think you're compromising for love. Nietzsche would say you're being domesticated through emotional dependency, but here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. You're not a victim in this process. You're a willing participant, because deep down, part of you wants to be led. Part of you craves the emotional security that comes from surrendering your will to someone who seems to have figured out the emotional puzzle of life. You were raised to believe that good men sacrifice for women, that love means putting her needs before your own, that masculine virtue is measured by how much you're willing to give up for feminine approval. And so, you enter relationships not as an equal, but as a supplicant, not as a partner, but as a worshipper seeking grace from his goddess. And she accepts this worship not because she's evil, but because the entire social structure has taught her that this is how relationships work. She's been conditioned to view male attention, male resources, male emotional energy as her natural due. Not because she's selfish, but because from childhood she's been told that her value lies in her ability to attract and maintain male investment. Nietzsche saw that what we call romantic love is actually a sophisticated power exchange disguised as mutual affection. She gives you the illusion of being chosen, desired, needed. In return, you give her your autonomy, your resources, your identity. And both parties convince themselves this is the highest form of human connection. But what happens when you start to see through the illusion? When you begin to recognize the patterns, the emotional manipulations, the subtle ways your behavior is being shaped, that's when the real test begins. Because most men, when they glimpse this truth, become either bitter or blind. They either hate women for the game, or they convince themselves the game doesn't exist. Nietzsche offered a third path, not hatred, not denial, but mastery. Understanding the game so completely that you can choose whether to play it, how to play it, and when to walk away from the table entirely. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Let me tell you about the woman Nietzsche feared most. Not the openly aggressive woman, not the obviously manipulative one, but the woman who has perfected the art of innocent control. She never raises her voice. She never makes direct demands. She never appears to be anything other than loving, supportive, and caring. Yet somehow, mysteriously, everything in your life begins to revolve around her emotional state. This woman has mastered what Nietzsche called moral tyranny, the ability to control others through the manipulation of guilt, shame, and emotional obligation. She doesn't tell you what to do. She just becomes sad, disappointed, or hurt when you don't do what she wants. And because you've been programmed to see yourself as responsible for her emotional well-being, you change your behavior to restore her happiness. She never says, "Don't go out with your friends." Instead, she becomes quiet and withdrawn when you mention your plans. She doesn't forbid you from pursuing your goals. She just expresses concerns about how those goals might affect us. She doesn't demand your attention. She just becomes more beautiful, more vulnerable, more needy precisely when you're trying to focus on something else. This is emotional warfare at its most sophisticated, and the genius of it is that you can never quite put your finger on what's happening. You can't accuse her of being controlling because she never issues orders. You can't call her manipulative because everything she does appears to come from a place of love and concern. Nietzsche understood that this type of influence is far more powerful than direct domination, because it makes the controlled party complicit in their own submission. You don't feel oppressed, you feel protective, you don't feel manipulated, you feel needed, you don't feel controlled, you feel loved. But look at the results. Over time, your world shrinks. Your decisions become filtered through the question, how will this affect her? Your goals become secondary to the project of maintaining her emotional equilibrium. Your identity becomes increasingly defined by your role in her life, rather than by your own autonomous development. This isn't necessarily conscious on her part. Many women who operate this way genuinely believe they're being loving and supportive. They've been conditioned to view relationships as emotional mergers, where boundaries dissolve and individual wills blend into a single unit, with her emotional needs at the centre. But Nietzsche saw the danger in this dynamic, not just for men, but for both parties. Because when one person's will becomes subordinate to another's emotional state, neither party can develop authentic strength. She becomes dependent on his constant validation and attention. He becomes dependent on her approval for his sense of self-worth. The result is what Nietzsche called mutual parasitism. Two incomplete people clinging to each other for psychological survival, calling their dependency love and their weakness virtue. But here's what most men never understand. This dynamic continues only as long as you participate in it. The moment you stop making her emotional state your primary responsibility, the moment you reclaim your autonomous will, everything changes. She can only control you to the degree that you need her approval to feel good about yourself. This is why Nietzsche emphasized the development of what he called self-overcoming, the process of becoming so psychologically complete within yourself that you no longer need external validation to maintain your sense of worth. When you reach this state, you can appreciate a woman's company without being enslaved by her moods. You can enjoy her affection without becoming addicted to it. The woman who has been unconsciously controlling you through emotional manipulation will immediately sense this shift, and her response will tell you everything you need to know about the true nature of your relationship. If she respects your newfound autonomy and steps up to meet you as an equal, then perhaps something real can be built. But if she escalates her emotional tactics, if she becomes more demanding, more manipulative, more willing to create crisis and drama to recapture your attention, then you know you were never dealing with love. You were dealing with strategy. Now let me reveal the most dangerous illusion that keeps men trapped in toxic relationship dynamics. You believe that if you just love her enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, she will finally feel secure enough to stop testing you. You think her emotional instability, her need for constant reassurance, her her tendency to create drama, are all symptoms of past wounds that your love can heal. This is the saviour complex that Nietzsche saw as one of the most destructive myths of romantic culture. The idea that love is primarily about healing, rescuing, and completing another person. But what if her instability isn't a wound to be healed? What if it's a strategy to maintain control? Think about it. As long as she remains emotionally unpredictable, you remain focused on managing her moods rather than pursuing your own goals. As long as she needs constant reassurance, you remain emotionally available for her needs rather than developing your own strength. As long as she's wounded and vulnerable, you remain in the position of protector and provider rather than equal partner. Nietzsche understood that some people, both men and women, unconsciously cultivate their own emotional instability because it gives them power over others. They don't want to be healed because being wounded is how they maintain their psychological advantage. This is why the broken bird syndrome is so common among men. You're attracted to damaged women not because you're compassionate, but because their damage makes you feel needed. Their weakness makes you feel strong. Their chaos makes you feel important. But you don't realise that you're not healing anyone. You're enabling a system that keeps both of you psychologically stunted. The truly secure woman doesn't need you to rescue her. She doesn't require constant emotional management. She doesn't create crisis to test your commitment. She brings her own stability to the relationship and expects you to bring yours. But this type of woman often seems boring to men who have become addicted to the drama of trying to save someone. Nietzsche saw that what many men call love is actually a sophisticated form of codependency. You become addicted to being needed, and she becomes addicted to being saved. Neither of you develops real psychological strength because you're both too busy playing your assigned roles in the rescue fantasy. But what happens when you stop trying to save her? When you withdraw your energy from the project of managing her emotional state? When you become more interested in your own development than in her psychological comfort? Initially, the response is usually an escalation. More drama, more crisis, more demands for your attention and energy. This is the test. She's checking to see if you'll return to your old role as emotional caretaker. If you hold your ground, if you refuse to be drawn back into the drama, one of two things will happen. Either she'll begin to develop genuine emotional stability because she no longer has the option of using instability as a control mechanism, or she'll find someone else to play the saviour role because that's what she was really after all along. This is how you discover the difference between a woman who is genuinely wounded and working toward healing, and a woman who is using her wounds as weapons. The first will respect your boundaries and work on herself. The second will punish you for refusing to remain trapped in her dysfunction. Nietzsche called this process the Great Separation, the moment when you stop confusing your need to be needed with love and start recognizing the difference between genuine partnership and psychological vampirism. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in exploring Nietzsche's deeper insights about power, relationships, and self-development. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for any man who wants to build authentic relationships rather than codependent fantasies. Here's where Nietzsche's analysis becomes truly revolutionary. He understood that the entire modern conception of romantic love is built on a lie. We've been taught that love means two people becoming one, that healthy relationships involve merging your identity with another person's, that true intimacy requires the dissolution of individual boundaries. But Nietzsche saw this as a recipe for mutual destruction. When two people merge their identities, neither person grows. Instead, they create a closed system where each person's weaknesses reinforce the other's, where individual development stops, and where both parties become increasingly dependent on the relationship for their sense of self. He proposed instead what he called love at a distance, the ability to appreciate, respect, and even adore another person while maintaining your own psychological sovereignty. This doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being strong enough within yourself that you can give freely without expecting anything in return, and receive gratefully without becoming dependent. This type of love is threatening to people who use relationships as a way to avoid themselves. It's threatening to women who have learned to maintain control through emotional manipulation. And it's threatening to men who have learned to feel valuable only when they're needed by someone else. But for those rare individuals who have done the work of developing genuine psychological strength, this is the only kind of love worth having. Because it's the only kind that doesn't diminish either party. The only kind that allows both people to continue growing. The only kind that can survive the test of time and change. When you love from this place of strength rather than need, everything changes. You stop trying to control her behaviour, and start focusing on your own development. You stop making her responsible for your happiness and start taking responsibility for your own emotional state. You stop seeing her as either goddess or demon and start seeing her as a human being with her own path to walk. This shift in perspective is terrifying to women who have been using your need as a source of power. Suddenly, they can't manipulate you through withdrawal because you're not desperate for their attention. They can't control you through emotional drama because you're not responsible for their feelings. They can't trap you through guilt because you've learned to distinguish between genuine responsibility and manipulative obligation. But for women who are genuinely interested in growth, in partnership, in mutual development, this shift is attractive. They recognize that a man who is psychologically sovereign is far more valuable as a partner than a man who is emotionally dependent. They understand that love between two strong people is infinitely more fulfilling than codependency between two weak ones. The question is, which type of woman have you been attracting? And more importantly, which type of man have you been offering to the world? You made it this far, which means you're already different from most men. Most would have stopped watching the moment their romantic illusions started being challenged. Most would have clicked away when the comfortable lies about love and relationships started being exposed. But you stayed. You listened. You allowed yourself to consider the possibility that everything you've been taught about women, about love, about what it means to be a good man in relationship might be fundamentally flawed. This is the first step toward what Nietzsche called transvaluation, the process of creating new values based on truth rather than comfortable fiction. It's the beginning of building relationships based on strength rather than weakness, on choice rather than need, on mutual respect rather than mutual manipulation. But knowledge without action is worthless. Understanding these dynamics intellectually means nothing if you don't have the courage to change how you show up in relationships. This requires you to do something that most men will never do. You have to stop being nice and start being real. You have to stop trying to earn love through sacrifice and start commanding respect through strength. You have to stop making women's emotional states your responsibility and start taking responsibility for your own psychological development. You have to stop looking for someone to complete you and start becoming complete within yourself. This transformation is not easy. It requires you to give up the comfortable role of emotional caretaker and take on the more challenging role of psychological sovereign. It requires you to disappoint women who want you to remain small and controllable. It requires you to walk away from relationships that are based on need rather than choice. But the reward for this work is immense. You become the kind of man who attracts women not because they need you, but because they choose you. You become capable of loving without losing yourself, of caring without becoming controlled, of being intimate without being invaded. Most importantly, you become dangerous to every woman who tries to control you through emotional manipulation. Not because you hate women, but because you're no longer available to play the victim in their psychological dramas. This is what Nietzsche meant when he talked about the overman, not someone who dominates others, but someone who has mastered himself so completely that he cannot be dominated by others. In the context of relationships, this means becoming so psychologically complete that you no longer need external validation to feel good about yourself. When you reach this level of development, the entire game changes. You stop chasing women and start choosing them. You stop trying to prove your worth and start demonstrating your value. You stop being reactive to their emotional states and start being responsive to your own authentic desires. This shift terrifies women who have been relying on your emotional dependency for their sense of power, but it attracts women who are genuinely ready for an equal partnership with a psychologically mature man. The choice is yours. You can continue to play the old game, the game where you sacrifice your autonomy for the illusion of love, where you trade your strength for temporary emotional security, where you remain trapped in the victim role that society has assigned to modern men. Or you can choose the path that Nietzsche mapped out, the path of self-overcoming, of psychological sovereignty, of becoming so complete within yourself that you no longer need anyone else to validate your existence. This is not a path for everyone. It requires you to give up the comfortable lies that keep most people trapped in mediocre relationships. It requires you to face the uncomfortable truths about yourself, about women, about the nature of power and attraction. But for those who have the courage to walk this path, the reward is nothing less than genuine freedom. Freedom from emotional manipulation. Freedom from the need to be needed. Freedom to love authentically rather than codependently. Nietzsche saw all of this coming over a century ago. He warned us about the dangers of romantic idealization, about the tyranny of emotional manipulation, about the trap of trying to find salvation through another person. Most people weren't ready to hear it then. Most people still aren't ready to hear it now. But you are. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it this far. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to use it to become bitter and resentful toward women? Or are you going to use it to become stronger, more aware, more capable of authentic love? The choice is yours, but choose wisely. Because once you see the truth that Nietzsche saw, you can never unsee it. And your relationships will never be the same. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment you realized you were being emotionally manipulated? What patterns do you see now that you couldn't see before? Share your story. Because recognition is the first step toward transformation. And if this video opened your eyes to uncomfortable truths you needed to hear, don't stop here. Subscribe for more content that will continue to challenge your assumptions and help you build authentic strength. Because the journey toward psychological sovereignty is just beginning. The woman you think you love doesn't exist. She's a performance designed to control you, but the man you're capable of becoming, the man who sees clearly and chooses consciously, he's waiting for you to have the courage to become him.